So I wound up working with Steve Hales and William Mataga, two young programmers whom I liked a lot. And I found myself making up excuses to go over to Synapse and hang out because I liked the atmosphere there so well. They gave me a computer and assignments I adored, like verb table. Right here are 35 or 40 verbs, maybe 100 verbs. Write sentences in which you execute this action with the direct object, whole for the direct object, successfully and unsuccessfully. Art is alternate realities, realities that are in some ways like the reality we experience, in some ways quite unlike it. This was that. And it was clear to me from my small experience of adventure, the description of Zork, the stuff I saw on these monochrome monitors, that this was largely about the quest plot, which is one of the basic plots of great works. The Gilgamesh epic is a quest for the nature of immortality, the nature of death, the nature of mortality. And Kill Dwarf, Get Sword, etc. was completely in that line. Indeed, the imagery was very traditional. I certainly wasn't familiar with Zork, which at the time that I was asked to do Mindwheel was the quintessential text adventure. I had a little bit played a version of adventure that was in the house. My kids were attached to it. The machine we had was an Atari. In fact, the computer that the guys at Synapse gave me when they decided I would be the first highbrow author to work on a text adventure was a computer called an Atari, which suggests how deep in the Middle Ages this was. I guess it was 1980, 1981, something like that. Certainly when I had a lot to do with it, people would talk about the freedom of the user compared to the book. And that, oh, in a book you're bound to this linear progress, and in the interactive narrative you're free. Well, the opposite is true. You're a slave when you're solving a puzzle, jigsaw puzzle, crossword puzzle. You are trying to find out what will succeed, and the maker has determined that. Whereas the book, you're free to move around and change pages, and this is something that people trying to design ebooks are dealing with very, very earnestly. So that the puzzle form, anything written in a puzzle form is a tyranny, it's a dictatorship. Because I, the maker, know the solution, know where you want to get, you sort of know where you want to get, I know exactly what it will be like. And I even control those little hidden secret corridors, little bonus things. To get away from that, to have something as truly free as I imagine Second Life must be, but also as rich and interesting as Dante's Commedia, there's no reason it can't be done someday. It just hasn't been done yet. I think the potential to wed the nature of the digital computer to a work entirely in language, that potential has yet to be explored in a really spectacular way. I sense that I'm not the only person starting to go, I feel very bored at spectacular computer graphics. After you've seen, it's like chase scenes in movies. The chase scene can become as predictable as the dialogue and the medium shot in a sitcom, an old sitcom. There's always a struggle between wearing out things becoming a cliche and finding a way to do them differently. Combat between superheroes with immense muscles, Transformers, what will the next generation be? As with language, things solidify into cliches. You see the power of using language, in which we interact all day, in which we do a certain amount of our thinking and introspection, making a work of art out of it that one person can then create out of their own body has a tremendous power. I think there could be a great work in graphics. There can be a great work in just language. There can be an immensely popular and appealing work in any of these genres, any of these media forms. There are reasons that works of art made completely out of words survive, and in some cases, works for children, like the Rowling series, become so immensely popular they don't even make a lot of money for people because they have to be discounted. They're so popular. There's a reason that poetry retains such a powerful appeal for people. It's something about the human scale. Of the various times I've fantasized what it would be like to do this, work in this genre again with the immense increase in memory and logic, all the programming advances, it's in the dialogue, that interaction, and devising clever, improvised ambiguities and startling correlations between the input from the user and the response by the generalissimo or caudillo. That there are times I've thought about that. They encouraged me not to look at the competition too much. They were not eager for me to make something like the things that already existed. Of course, I did peek. I peeked at Zork. Later, I peeked at, I actually forget the guy's name. There were 2 or 3 people doing naturalistic narratives, and those had more literary pretension. And they were basically like taking the materials of a John Updike novel and putting them into interactive form. And that, for me, was like putting my imagination into leg shackles and handcuffs. That was really kind of really agonizing. I never could get into those. The closest I came to any conflict or anxiety was their constant pressure to put puzzles in the thing. And I just wanted to keep imagining. And they said, the guys who pay money for this will be very disappointed if they can get from A to Z in an hour, let alone 10 minutes. They're spending whatever it was at the time, $25 or $40. Can't remember what it was going to retail for. They want a week or 2 of agony. Of course, they were right. After the game came out, there were cheat sheet, sort of pre-websites, and the elaborateness of the difficulty had to be built into it. That was the only tug I felt. It was like a naive imagining of what it was to be a writer. Just make things up, and that was quite enchanting. Maybe that same feeling of freedom is what makes people go into this world I have no interest in or sympathy with, but clearly it must have a lot of appeal. I should probably find out more about it, this Second Life kind of world. The most innovative people involved with Mindwheel were the programmers, I think. William Montfort devised an assembly language, and here I'm using jargon above me, that he nicknamed BTZ. It was the BTZ assembly language. BTZ was better than Zork, was the acronym. For me, it was just an immense sense of freedom. Odysseus has to get home. There are different kinds of quests, and the quest in their case is to save a completely fake world. And the silliness of disaster movies, the silliness of our own need to have immense things at stake, what Hitchcock called the MacGuffin. The MacGuffin is the destruction of the world. And MacGuffin is a deliberately silly world that means you need something people have to get. I was interested in all of those things, and it clearly tickled me to take Dante's imagery and move it as far as possible from the context of academic professionals and put it back into the context of trying to give the user or reader a good time. The vision that Ihor had that made him look up some highbrow poet who was teaching at Berkeley was an impulse to put more art, more intellectual content, something more like literature into the interactive computer electronic theater. I was interested in the kind of hybrid way art moves along. I was interested in something new. I wanted to get away from the literary genre. I wanted to write a really exciting artistic game. And the marketers and the people, not in the pit, but in the nice offices at Synapse, certainly wanted it to be a book. For Steve, my main collaborator, it was an interesting distinction. He wanted it to be hard and absorbing, so the guys would spend, guys like himself would spend lots of time figuring it out and buried in it. And I wanted it to be as nutty and crazy and strange as possible. And a lot of our, we can call them arguments, a lot of our discussions, the dialectic was between I wanted to think of some new goofy thing, and they wanted to be sure that it would be hard to figure out, that there would be a strong puzzle aspect to it. An interesting thing about Steve, William, the other guys there, is that the distinction between genres was minor for them. They kept saying, we should have one playing through of the game that you can publish as a book, Robert. And I would say, oh no, a book is very different from just a printout of one experience of the plot. So no, just publish it. And in a way, they were quite prophetic. We're in a period now where you see an ad on TV, and it's an ad for a sci-fi film that's also a game, or an adventure film that's also a game. And unless you're more sophisticated than I am, you have a lot of trouble telling whether you're looking at part of a video game or part of a film. And that blurring of genre was something that the programmers sort of took for granted. The plot I settled on was full of allusions to Dante, to the Commedia of Dante. I had no idea at the time I'd wind up doing a translation of Inferno, but it seemed natural to borrow stuff. In Mindwheel, the scientist who sets you into the, the neuroastrophysical matrix, whatever he sets you into where you have your adventures, is called Dr. Virgil.